Have with us today a special guest from the White House. And give her a round of applause. Shelley Greenspan is our special guest, and she serves as the White House liaison in the American Jewish community across the United States. And so I know she shared with me that she's delighted to be here tonight, because this is a special neighborhood, a historic neighborhood for the Jewish community across New York City, and continues to be a strong enclave of Jewish community, family members, yeshiva universities, synagogues, kosher food, and everything else that comes along with all of that. So I've always said that one of the strongest, if not the strongest community here is the Jewish community, because they have stayed here during good times and bad times. When the neighborhood was going through a rough time, I remember back in the 80s and 90s, this was just a very violent neighborhood and environment. Homicides were like 120 one year in just one police precinct. Imagine that. And the Jewish community stayed here and helped everybody else get through that nightmare. And now we're stronger because of that as a community. And I think that in the process, also we were able to build bridges, and we were able to build relationships that remain strong and unbroken. And that's such a great story. I think it's a New York City story, because that's what New York City is about. It's about diversity, is about different religions, different languages, different cultures, different experiences, and those neighborhoods come together. They come together. They're just resilient and strong. So this is a special neighborhood, and we welcome our special guest today, and she will speak about many things that are happening in the White House regarding the Jewish community. I'm also the co-chair of the Latino Jewish Caucus in Congress, right? So, and I have been co-chair since I got there. And together, we've done tremendous things. We lift our voices when we see the ugly face of anti-Semitism coming out. We lift our voices and we push against hate crimes. And we try to build bridges and make our bonds stronger. For example, one of the initiatives that I'm very proud of is right here in George Washington High School, right? We were able to get a private citizen of New York City to fund, this is now going on the second year, a particular class, a curriculum on the Holocaust, right? Right here in George Washington High School. The same school that Henry Kissinger went to, that J.J. Javis went to, that Tiny Tim went to. And Harry Belafonte went to, great luminaries, right? The kids there now are learning about the Holocaust, right? And there's legislation in Washington that I'm a co-sponsor of to ensure that the Holocaust is taught in the curriculum of our schools, so people never really forget, right? And so that's an important initiative there. We're going to continue to keep it. In fact, I saw the principal just last night when the mayor was here, and she came straight to me and said, thank you. Those kids are now, they went to Washington, they toured Washington, they've been to the Holocaust Museum. It's a wonderful experience, and I think one that we could and should showcase across the city of New York and the country. I want to recognize the presence of our local state senator, Robert Jackson. And let's begin. So first, let me introduce to you the dais here and who are going to be the speaker. But before we do that, I want to thank Michael Miller, who never retired, no matter what you read about in the paper. Michael, I had the privilege of visiting Israel for the first time with Michael Miller back in 1900. And since then, I've been many, many times. Okay, we have Rabbi, excuse me, a guy named Adriano Espaillat should really practice the pronunciations of the name, but Rabbi Yerushin Silver, who's here with us today. Right? And I know there's a bunch of folks that are here tonight that are important to the Jewish cause. But let me introduce you to the folks here, sharing the table with Shelley. We have Noah Gilbert, who's here, the Chief Operating Officer of the Jewish Community Relations Committee. We have Josh Kramer, Josh. There is Josh. And then Itzian Neer, right? Did I say it right? Itzian? That's close enough? Okay. Well, thank you for being with us today. And we're going to now start by getting the benediction from Rabbi Jacob Taupis. He's going to do the benediction today. So please, stand up.
Hi, my name is Jacob Taubes. I'm privileged to serve as the rabbi here at Mount Sinai Jewish Center. Welcome to everyone. And, it's a big privilege to have all of you, and thank the Center, and thank the Congressman and all his staff. This week's Torah portion, the part of the Bible, Hebrew Bible, that we'll read in the synagogue this coming week, we read about the evil king Balak, who hired Bilam to curse the Israelites, to curse the Jews. And God saved the Israelites by turning those curses into blessings. And so at this point, we turn to God again, as we always do, and ask Him to turn all those who wish evil upon the people of Israel, upon the state of Israel, upon all the good people of this world, to turn those curses into blessings, to continue to protect us and to bless this nation. Amen.
Of a neighbor who is the second sister, I may add, sister of the second gentleman. And Jamie Enhoff is here with us today. Jamie, where are you? There she is. She's a neighbor, and that's the vice president's husband's sister, the second sister, right?
Got it.
Okay. And, okay, so we'll start with, we'll hear first, before we hear from our special guest, we'll hear from Noam Gilbert, who's the Chief Operating Officer of the Jewish Community Relations Committee. So welcome.
Thank you, Congressman. It's a pleasure to be here. I might be a new face on the dais, but I want everybody to know that Michael Miller, again, second shout out of the night, is the person who hired me when I was 25, my first gig right out of school at the JCRC. He's been a mentor and teacher, and I know the impact you've had on a Congress member and so many people in this room, so it's a pleasure to be sitting here and having you guarding my backpack instead of the other way around for once. I also want to just take this opportunity because even before Michael, even before you hired me, there was one person in the audience that's here today who got to meet him before you did, and that's 5 rows back, Dr. Paul Rudensky, who's a member of the community here, who hired me as his intern at the Museum of Jewish Heritage. And one of the things that Paul taught me was that it isn't certainly important to learn about the Holocaust, very important, but it's also important to learn about who the Jewish community was before the Holocaust and after the Holocaust. The story of the Jewish people is a long one. My prepared remarks are as follows. Erev Tov, good evening. On behalf of the Jewish Community Relations Council of New York, it's an honor to come before you as a co-sponsor of such an important event in such a vibrant shul in a district overflowing with Jewish life and Jewish history. I want to thank Congressman Espaillat for hosting tonight's event, and our distinguished speaker, Shelley Greenspan, the White House liaison to the American Jewish community. I'm very much looking forward to tonight's discussion, shedding light on the recently released White House strategy to combat anti-Semitism. I also want to thank Lori Tobias Cohen and Mary Batista for all the behind-the-scenes effort that have made tonight a reality. For nearly 50 years, the JCRC has served to advance the security, interest, and values of the New York Jewish community. At this moment, there are over 1 million Jews in New York City, hundreds of thousands more in Westchester, Long Island, and Rockland County, and more than 2,000 Jewish institutions in downstate New York alone, all that need protection as we experience a significant rise in anti-Semitism. Together with UJA Federation, JCRC created the Community Security Initiative, a team of almost 20 people that work to ensure seamless communication with law enforcement when it comes to addressing anti-Semitic incidents. We work to ensure that funding from the federal and state government is allocated for securing our synagogues, community centers, summer camps, and schools, and to provide security assessments for those institutions to be better protected from those who seek to harm the Jewish people. We thank Congressman Espaillat and his colleagues in Congress for maintaining this top priority for us and for all houses of worship. In parallel, JCRC also strives to build bridges with the many diverse communities with whom we share the city through leadership development programs, coalitions to improve quality of life, and make our city safer for all people. For decades, JCRC has brought promising young leaders to Israel to have them experience Jewish statehood firsthand and expose them to the beauty and complexity of Israel. In fact, just over 20 years ago, younger Dominican American representing the 72nd District in the New York State Assembly joined us on this life-changing experience. And since then, throughout his tenure in the Assembly, the State Senate, and now in Congress, he has consistently been an ally for the Jewish community in the State of Israel. We're grateful that he joined us so many years ago, and we're even more grateful for Congressman Espaillat's commitment and dedication to the safety, security, and vibrancy of the Jewish community at home and abroad.
Thank you so much for your presentation. And now let me just first also thank my team. You know, you always forget your family members, right? But Laurie and Anady are wonderful, and I also have Max and Cynthia and Rolando and all the team. You can visit us if you have any issues at 720 181st Street, right up the street, right? You know where it is. And so now let's listen to our good friend Josh Kramer from the American Jewish Community.
Thank you so much, Congressman. Thank you so much to all of you for joining us here this evening. It is an honor and a pleasure to speak before such a distinguished crowd and also to share the dais with such a distinguished group. It's great to see you in New York, Shelley. And I just want to give a little bit of background on American Jewish Committee and the New York region, which I represent. I'm the director of the New York region of AJC, American Jewish Committee, the global advocacy organization for the Jewish people. AJC is nearing on 120 years old, started right here in New York City, and the organization has advocated on behalf of the needs of the global Jewish community for all of that time. The only thing is those needs have changed over time. And in the last 30 years, while our focus had been on anti-Semitism abroad, we had spent so much time training European governments to prepare and to respond to anti-Semitism. Those needs have grown here domestically. And so we are now turning our attention to focus a little bit more on anti-Semitism here in the United States. We just 2-3 weeks ago got back from our annual large conference, the Global Forum, on the stage of which our CEO, your former colleague, Congressman Ted Deutsch, former Congressman Ted Deutsch, excuse me, announced that we would be forming an anti-Semitism task force to ensure that the White House plan to respond to anti-Semitism is a success and has a measurable difference, makes a measurable difference on anti-Semitism here. And no neighborhood in New York is escaping this rise in anti-Semitism. In fact, just a couple of months ago, I, as well as some colleagues, presented some materials, some resources to the youth programming staff of the YMHA here in this very neighborhood. And so the needs are great. We all wish to work together to respond to those needs. And we also were proud to bring together those anti-Semitism envoys from across Europe to the White House a couple of months ago to work on this important plan. And I wouldn't be able to pass this mic without mentioning AJC's efforts on Latino-Jewish relations. In fact, it was great to see you at the launch program for the caucus that you mentioned, the Latino-Jewish caucus in Congress back in April. And so I just want to once again thank everyone for having me and for the Congressman and everyone, really, for convening this important conversation.
Thank you. And let me say that the caucus is, the Latino Jewish caucus is bipartisan. And we have co-chairing it, the great Debbie Wasserman Schultz from Florida. And then, of course, Congressman Diaz-Balart from Miami as well. So we do a lot of bipartisan work, and we draw a lot of attention and support for many important issues that are very relevant to the Jewish community. And now let's hear from Nia.
Thank you, Congressman. I'm going to use my short time just to convey some gratitude. I want to thank you, Representative Espaillat, for inviting us here to be with you and the company of these outstanding organizations. I want to thank you for being a close ally to the Jewish community. Yes, it's about the important role you currently play as co-chair of the Latino Jewish Caucus. But I have a long memory, and I've been with ADL since 1999. And I remember when I started, I was working with you and the Dominican community and building bridges. And you've always used your pulpit to speak out against anti-Semitism. And we appreciate that, we know that. And of course, it's also critical to thank you, Shelley, and the White House for the release of this really important U.S. national strategy to counter anti-Semitism. We deeply appreciate how the White House has stepped up and delivered this significant strategy, recognizing that anti-Semitism is not about politics, but principles. And even as we're concerned by anti-Semitism, we have to recognize that we're in a historic moment. It's the first time in the history of this country that the federal government has developed a comprehensive strategy to end the hatred of Jews in our times. And I think it's particularly appropriate that we're doing this here in New York, where ADL's data shows that in 2022, New York State had by far the most anti-Semitic incidents than any other state across the nation. And you know, when I speak about anti-Semitism, one of the most common and disturbing questions I get from Jewish audiences is whether the climate we're in now resembles 1930s Germany. And I understand and I appreciate where that question comes from and the fear and the anxiety behind that question. And the short answer why that comparison is faulty can be witnessed by everyone in this room. In the 1930s, we had state-sponsored anti-Semitism. Today, in the face of anti-Semitism, we have a government that is pushing back. It's pushing back against the rising tide of hate in society. It's a government that will work with us to celebrate Jewish American heritage, works with us to improve the safety and security of the Jewish community, and to reverse the normalization of anti-Semitism and hate, and build collaborative action. The hate is real, but we can combat it effectively if we are united and strategic and work together. Thank you.
Thank you. I also traveled, Michael, to Israel with the Anti-Defamation League, and then I really found out what ADL meant. It meant all day long. That's the kind of work they were putting us up to. But thank you so much for being with us. I also want to thank Mount Sinai. This is a great place that has seen a resurgence, a renaissance, right? With many young families, and you have made our neighborhood stronger. So now, please join me in welcoming our good special friend, right from the White House, the person that's in charge of the liaison of the American Jewish community, Shelley Greenspan.
Thank you so much. Can everyone hear me in the back? I just want to make sure you're good. Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much, Congressman, for that warm introduction. It's really so inspiring to be introduced by such a dedicated public servant. So thank you so much for having me in your district. Thank you all for welcoming me so warmly to your community. I want to give a shout out to two special people. First, my Torah study partner who came, Rhonda, sitting in the front row. And also, I want to give a shout out to my brother who's here, and he just got engaged. This is my first time I'm seeing him since he got engaged. I grew up in a really interesting community. I went to a Reform synagogue, a conservative camp, Camper Ma, and an Orthodox day school. I very much embrace the diversity in the Jewish community. It's actually one of the best parts about my job. But after graduating from high school, I did a gap year in Israel, and after my gap year, I went off to the University of Florida, which during my freshman year, I met Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman-Schultz, who you just referenced, one of your colleagues. And I was speaking at an event for my university, UFLL, and we ended up talking about really similar things. I didn't know much about politics at the time, but she was actually a former Gator herself, had served on Student Senate just like I was doing, and a few weeks later, I was up in DC interning in her office. And that was really my first start in politics, and I was hooked. I got to see Jewish values play out in a very tangible way, and it is really addicting, let me tell you. So fast forward to today, many years later, I have the honor of serving as the White House's Jewish liaison, and when I first started in this role, many people asked me, how is it that I can speak on behalf of all the American Jews in this country? So let me tell you that it's not my job. I wouldn't want that to be my job, but what I do is serve as the bridge between the administration and the American Jewish community, and I really want to thank the Congressman again, and also Lori for creating this space, because this is exactly how my job is supposed to play out, listening to your concerns, hearing from community members, and relaying those concerns, questions, back to the administration, and vice versa. So I'm really grateful to be here. Every morning, I have the honor of walking onto the grounds of the White House, where I get to work alongside and for some of the most intelligent and kind-hearted people on the planet, doing their best to make real the principles studied, internalized, and celebrated in our Jewish tradition. I get to try to help these remarkable public servants bend the arc of our nation and our world towards something more perfect and more fair, giving life to the values of Tikkun Olam and Tzedek. At the same time, I take great pride in the work the administration does on behalf of the Jewish community. Our actions have reinforced the fact that the Jewish culture and values are essential to the character and vibrancy in America. Just last month, we highlighted our role as essential threads in our country's story at a Jewish American Heritage Month reception in the White House. But it's not just a single month where this matters. It's the first ever Rosh Hashanah reception held at the White House. The first permanent menorah for Hanukkah. So basically that was the first ever piece of Judaica that's now part of the White House Historical Association collection. It's the first time a mezuzah was hung on the doorpost of a vice president's residence. The first time we celebrated Sukkot at the Blair House, in which we invited ambassadors from Muslim-majority countries for a dialogue on interfaith cooperation. And yes, all of those events were kosher. The kitchen at the White House was kosher for every single one of these events. One of my favorite firsts was also the first ever Jewish Women's Summit, in which more than 70 women from across the country came to the White House for a series of briefings from senior administration officials. Another exciting first is getting to work with the second gentleman, the first spouse of a vice president or president who is Jewish. And again, I want to recognize Jamie, who's here with us today. Thank you so much. This past January, when I traveled to Poland and Germany with the second gentleman to commemorate International Holocaust Remembrance Day, it was a really moving experience for all of us. I had been many times before, but this trip was really different and special. I think we all had a different intention in mind. Our first day on the trip was at Auschwitz, which we later breathed during the International Holocaust Remembrance Day ceremony. But the rest of our trip was really an opportunity to learn about countering anti-Semitism, the history of the Holocaust, and what more we can do to counter anti-Semitism in our country today. While I was in Krakow, I had the opportunity actually to visit my Bubby's apartment. Both my grandparents were Holocaust survivors. And when I was on the trip, it was a jam-packed trip. I managed to break away for a few minutes, and I went to her old apartment, right in the center of Krakow. And when I was there, I saw the mezuzah, or the traces of the mezuzah that used to hang on her doorpost. And it was a really moving experience for me, because there I was 70 or 80 years later, after her family was kicked out of that apartment, many of them who were then sent to the Krakow ghetto and later killed. But there I was as a representative of the United States government in a role that really celebrates my Jewish identity. As exciting as all of these firsts have been, whether it's the receptions or the mezuzahs, the cultural moments, I have to say that none of them have been as significant as the launch of the first ever national strategy to counter anti-Semitism. I have the official booklet right here at 70 pages. We have fact sheets that are not as long. But as the president said during the launch, this was just last month, our strategy is the most comprehensive and ambitious national effort in U.S. history to counter anti-Semitism. So I just want to take a step back so you guys can all understand how this came to be. Basically, back in December, this was really, there was a huge rise in anti-Semitism. This was when Kanye was making, his remarks. There was the banner in Los Angeles, numerous attacks here in the community in New York. So actually, it was the second gentleman who said we have to do something. And so he convened a roundtable. Many of the organizations here were represented at that roundtable of Jewish community leaders. And as many of you all know, when you get a group of Jews together, they might not always agree. But in this case, when it came to talking about what we should do about anti-Semitism, they all spoke with one voice, and that we needed a national strategy to counter anti-Semitism. So 1 week after that roundtable, President Biden announced an interagency policy committee to counter anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, and other forms of hate and bias, but with the first order of business to be to create a national strategy to counter anti-Semitism. So since that announcement, we got to work. We convened over 24 federal departments and agencies. We met with them on a weekly basis to see what more they can be doing to counter anti-Semitism. We held listening sessions with thousands of diverse stakeholders, many of whom have in this room participated, from the Jewish community, all different races, religions, civil rights leaders, students, parents, to really get a sense of how folks were experiencing anti-Semitism and what suggestions they had. We also met with the international special envoys, which you mentioned earlier, so thank you, HAC. We met with members of Congress, really to make sure this was a whole of government and whole of society effort. So together with all of this input, we produced a whole of society strategy that's rooted in the president's agenda to fight hate, strengthen our democracy, and restore the soul of our nation. The strategy, which was again launched last month, it features more than 100 new actions by federal agencies and more than 100 calls to action for actors across American society, from Congress to state and local officials to tech sector and other companies to civil society and faith leaders. And I say that just to differentiate. We can't do everything alone. We are limited by what we're able to do in the federal government, so the calls to action are to other individuals and organizations who can also do their part to counter anti-Semitism. And if you just give me a few minutes, I want to just walk through the strategy. I'm happy to answer questions afterwards, but just to give you some of the outline of the meat of the strategy, if that's all right. The strategy itself has 4 pillars. These pillars are based on the concerns we heard from stakeholders and experts about the nature of the problem of anti-Semitism and how to address it. Each pillar has a number of strategic goals to drive the work stream more specifically, and each goal has a number of federal actions and calls to action. Every single federal action for the agency has a deadline to complete its work. So all of those federal action agencies are going to be completed within 1 year. So that's not usually common, I would say, in government, where you don't have a deadline, you don't know when things are going to get done. Everything that we are asking the federal government to do will be completed within 1 year. So I'm just going to walk through the pillars really quick, if that's all right. Pillar 1 is increase awareness and understanding of anti-Semitism, including its threat to America, and broaden appreciation of Jewish American heritage. In order to fight anti-Semitism, Americans must recognize and understand it. This pillar seeks to increase awareness and education in schools, communities, and the workplace about anti-Semitism, including the Holocaust and Jewish American heritage. It has 3 strategic goals. Increase school-based education about anti-Semitism, including the Holocaust and Jewish American heritage. Raise awareness about anti-Semitism and Jewish American heritage outside of the classroom, and increase workplace training on countering anti-Semitism. bolster research on anti-Semitism and its impact on American society, including its intersection with other forms of hate. Pillar 2, improve safety and security for Jewish communities. To prevent violence against Jewish communities through accountability, deterrence, and effective responses to attacks, the strategy aims to improve data collection on anti-Semitism, ensure vigorous enforcement of hate crime laws by the Department of Justice, and increase federal funding for the physical security of Jewish institutions like the one that we are in today. This pillar has 7 supporting strategic goals. I'm sorry, I know this is long, but I just want you guys to all understand how this strategy, it's not meant to be just paper that sits on a shelf. We're really implementing this, so I'm almost done. 1 is to improve data collection on anti-Semitism. 2, ensure robust enforcement of hate crime laws. 3, enhance the physical security of Jewish and other religious communities and institutions. 4, improve threat information sharing between law enforcement and online platforms. 5, expand community-based prevention efforts. And 6, support for victims of anti-Semitic harassment and attacks. Pillar 3, reverse the normalization of anti-Semitism and minimize anti-Semitic discrimination. This pillar focuses on combating anti-Semitism online and on college campuses, among other concerns. To address the rise of anti-Semitic speech and intimidation, especially online, this strategy urges all Americans to speak out against anti-Semitism and calls on Congress and tech platforms to take action and to address hate online. The strategy also commits agencies to raising awareness of and enforce federal non-discrimination laws. This pillar has 6 supporting strategic goals: speak out forcefully, tackle anti-Semitism online, increase digital and media literacy and civics education. 4, address anti-Semitism in K-12 schools. 5, use federal non-discrimination laws to counter anti-Semitic and related forms of discrimination. And 6, promote religious communities' equitable access to government programs. The last pillar, which is I'm sure something that you guys are all leaders in, being such community leaders yourselves. Pillar 4 is build cross-community solidarity and collective action. Partnerships across diverse communities and faiths provide a foundation to counter anti-Semitism. This pillar has 2 strategic goals: identify and scale the most effective cross-community solidarity building efforts, and 2, expand and mobilize multi-faith partnerships. So if you have suggestions, please let me know. There are a handful of actions that we'll be taking under each individual pillar, and a handful of calls to action that I really encourage you to read further online. But in terms of the implementation, like I said, this was just launched, but we are implementing this with the full force in which we actually drafted it, meaning that it will continue to be implemented under the Interagency Policy Committee, which is led by the Domestic Policy Council and the National Security Council. And I will say it's a partnership. You know, we expect the Jewish community, other members of Congress to hold us accountable. This is all written down. We're not going to get everything right. We're also not going to solve anti-Semitism. I want to, we're doing our best, and I wish there was some magic answer, but right now we are hoping to contain the problem, and we really believe that these solutions are going to move the needle. And just thank you all for your partnership. Thank you for caring a lot about this issue, and really thank you for the Congressman for his leadership in this.
Thank you so much, Kelly. And, this is a very comprehensive strategy to combat anti-Semitism. So I urge you all to read it. But again, it's not just the word, it's our action, our collective action that will make it happen.